Good evening. We'll start in just a minute as people come into the room. All right, looks like our number of attendees has stabilized, so I will go ahead and kick this off. Thank you all for joining us tonight for a conversation about 2033 North Kingsbury. My name is Brian Pelrine. I'm Director of Zoning and Development for Alderman Hopkins, and I will turn it over to the Alderman now for some introductory remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate your attendance and your continued participation. I know many of you were in the first community meeting we had on this over a year ago. It's been under review since that time. As you'll recall from that meeting, there were two different design proposals. I think the consensus was that there actually was a superior of the two alternatives, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. That consensus does not extend to support for the project, and I understand that. We'll be talking about some of the concerns that people have raised, and there's a petition going around in opposition to it right now that I'm aware of. And by the way, the request for a breakout session from the loft residents is at 1872. I will agree to that. So after this meeting, we will schedule that, and we can talk in a little bit more detail about the specific concerns that you're raising as a result of your petition. But for tonight, we're just going to go over the additional details of the second and final proposal, some of the design changes that the development team has implemented during the past 12 months of review. So you can have a chance to look at that and then answer the questions as best we can and deal with the concerns going forward. This matter was on the zoning committee agenda for last month. I deferred it at my request to have this continued discussion with the Sheffield Neighbors Association, and Brian Comer is here to take the meeting from this point and to facilitate the Q&A. We will have chat questions during the presentation, and then there'll be an opportunity for live questioning at the end of the meeting. Use the raise your hand feature, which I'm sure you're all familiar with by now, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So with that, Brian Comer, take it from here.
Thanks, Alderman. I want to thank you for co-hosting this meeting with us and thank all the attendees from the area, as well as our panelists for joining us tonight. As the Alderman said, there was a public meeting on this last June where two designs were presented. And as we said in that meeting, that we would come back once a final design by Sterling Bay had been decided upon. And so we became aware of this in the recent days. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to ask questions of the developer, as well as allow a platform for residents to express themselves and also ask questions and learn about the final design that they want to take before Committee on Zoning. And with that, I want to introduce Katie Jenke-Dale from DLA Piper.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian, and thank you, Alderman Hopkins, for convening this meeting tonight. As mentioned, my name is Katie Jenke-Dale. I'm with DLA Piper. We're zoning counsel for Sterling Bay, along with my colleague Rich Clowder, who's on tonight. We also have representatives from Sterling Bay and Papa George Hames, our project architect, and KLOA, which is our traffic consultant, on with us. Chris, if you could advance to the next slide. So I know many of you are familiar with this site. It's mid-block on Kingsbury between Magnolia and Southport, and is shown here in proximity to the nearby both CTA and Metro stations. Next slide. It falls within the North Branch Framework, which is subject to the North Branch Framework Plan that was adopted in 2017. We've outlined some of the relevant principles on this slide. I'm happy to answer any questions about that slide or about those principles, many of which guided the discussions with the city, in addition to the community feedback that was just mentioned by the Alderman and SNA. Next slide. This is just another view of the site from a different vantage point to the west. Next slide. And this is, as discussed, kind of uniquely last summer, we presented at two plans at a community, at the community meeting. The one on the left is one of them that we showed. It was a shorter building that covered more of the site. And the one on the right was a taller plan, but had more open space at grade, as you'll see at the bottom in the summary, about just under 10,000 square feet of difference in open space. At that meeting, we collected feedback. We also went to the City Committee on Design in August and and continued discussions with the Department of Planning and Development, or DPD. As a result of all of that, we ended up advancing with the more or less the design on the right-hand side of the slide. Next one, Chris. So this kind of shows the moves that we made as a result of all that feedback. You'll see in the lower right-hand corner the decrease in the podium length, which allowed for more open space on the site, which prior to that was kind of only that somewhat triangle shape on the right-hand side. There's a corresponding increase in height as a result of kind of remassing the site. Next one, Chris.
All right.
And then here are some additional kind of massing changes that came from all the feedback that we received. So again, that additional open space is highlighted on, call it, the right-hand side of the building. It ends up being about 43% of the total site coverage is now open space, which is a pretty significant increase. And then we also changed the massing to step the building down to the north to give a better transition. The city also thought that this allowed for more light and air with this new massing, especially as the building is experienced from the Clybourne or from Clybourne or the east. With that, I will turn it over to Chris, and he'll go through the final design in more detail. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi. Good evening, good afternoon, good evening. Chris Woodfin. I'm with Papa George Haynes, Senior Associate here, and want to take you through a brief kind of view around the building from far and up close to some of the developments that have been made since we last presented to you a little over a year ago. So one of the main things, as Katie was describing, was the consolidation of the building into the northern part of the site, which, as you see in this image here, allows for a larger open area on the south side. So we actually, from the low version to the taller version, we almost doubled our open space area on the south end of the site. This different massing articulation allowed us to think differently of how we are adapting to the site and the context. We feel like the context of the neighborhood and the potential buildings just to the north or just to the west in Lincoln Yards prompted a building that was not rectangular necessarily, but pushed and pulled and adapted to its context. For this reason, you start to see a stepping on the north end of the building, responding to some of the context and the buildings on the north side, and pulling away at the south end towards Kingsbury and allowing more light and air and views out towards the city, as we sort of made this secondary ground plane at the fourth level. On the south end of that, the building at the fourth level has a very generous amenity space, shared amenity space, and then unique units that begin to flank the building on the north and east and west side, allowing for private terraces off of some of the units at the fourth level. The building also, this image also illustrates the relationship of the height of the new version in relation to the future Lincoln Yards just west. And we have maintained from the last iteration, we've maintained 275 feet as our building height top of the building in this version. So in this slide, we have a street view looking from the southwest, looking northeast. You'll see in the foreground our open area where we again, we'll look at that in a little more detail in a later slide, but as we begin to articulate what the landscaped area could become. We've also begun looking at the podium as it relates to the entire residential portion of the building above. And we've begun to sculpt it where we are pushing and pulling the massing of the podium so that it becomes a cohesive whole with the residential portion above. That texture and the light and the shadow are important things to us in the formation of the design. Masonry and glass and aluminum metal panels, they're all important parts of the design, how the building becomes formed and how it's viewed at a distance and also at a pedestrian level as well. This is a view from the east. If you were directly above Clybourne, let's say, looking northwest. And one of the comments we had from the DPD and the Committee on Design was how we were addressing the backside of the building, because in a sense, the backside from Clybourne is really the front side from Clybourne. So you'll see the podium articulation that we have established around the Kingsbury side and on the southern side turns around into the alley as well. This was done to provide a continuity in the design from what would be visible from the Clybourne corridor. Again, you'll see the pushing and pulling of the massing of the podium, which we feel reflects the residential massing above. The residential portion as well has been pushed and pulled. It's a more slender floor plate from the 4th level up. And again, this provides a closer view of the 4th floor amenity deck level. The other important consideration and response from the feedback was on the alley side. We've relocated the loading dock midway down the building. You'll see it, a small rectangle here peeking above this retail store, as well as the generator moved down mid-block or mid-building in order to keep it out of view, visual view from Clybourne and as far away from general public access as we could. This is a view from the north. What we'll talk about this a little bit further down, but what you'll see on the foreground here is we've added a private drive, which is connecting Kingsbury to the alleyway. And this does a couple of things. It takes off our garage entrances from Kingsbury and also provides access relief into the alley, to and from the alley. So this again, and then the building above the residential portion, you see the stepped massing at the 15th floor, as well as you begin to see some of the studies in the articulation of the facade, which is a combination of masonry and glass and metal panels. And here's a close-up view. This is on Kingsbury, looking from across the street. And another view, I think, of what we are excited about, the visual texturization of the facade. Again, playing with light and shadow and covered ground level exterior spaces, which, and then, vision glass all along the most of the facade at the ground level, and wrapping around on the right here, on the right side. Off the screen here would be the open space. And then another view standing sort of at the corner in the open space, looking north towards the residential entrance here in the center. And just begin to expressing the design of the podium, and again, its relation and connection to the residential portion above. And a detail shot just showing what we think is a rich textural palette of masonry, 2 different colors of masonry. Masonry in part because we feel it brings a human scale to the building, as a brick is a module that fits in a hand and brings a scale and a warmth. In addition to showing outdoor spaces, both on a terrace here and coming off the screen to the left, and large oversized balcony / terraces, which become really outdoor living rooms. And I'll turn it over to KLOA.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening. My name is Louis Abuna. I'm principal with KLOA. KLOA was retained to prepare a traffic study for the proposed development. And the slide that you see here provides kind of a summary of the findings of the traffic study, which essentially indicated that incrementally the proposed development will not have a significant impact on the traffic in the study area intersections, and that as the access, as Chris described, designed to provide the private drive connecting Kingsbury with the alley, will adequately disperse the traffic that will be generated by the proposed development and minimize the impact on Kingsbury Street and the complex along Kingsbury Street. It's important to note that this traffic study was thoroughly reviewed by CDOT and approved by CDOT. Having said that, and while this is only one development amongst several other planned and proposed developments in the area, and in recognition of the need for area-wide infrastructure improvements and to address neighborhood concerns, Sterling Bay has asked KLOA to look into identifying a number of improvements in the area that will help in mitigating and improving traffic flow. As we begin in developing, identifying these improvements, we will continue to work with the SNA dealership leadership and the Alderman's office in coordination with other agencies, mainly CDOT, in order to refine and vet the feasibility of these improvements and identify opportunities for collaboration so that it could be implemented in the future. Thank you, and I'll turn it over back to Chris.
Thank you. So just a quick look at the plan where we're showing here on the bottom, the private drive that was referenced previously is here on the far left side, north side of the site. Effectively, the building was pushed down 20 feet to allow for this drive, and then allow for residential parking and parking access off of the drive as opposed to Kingsbury. We of course still have a curb cut, but we have elongated the distance in the site and pushed it all the way to the end to create as long as a undisrupted frontage as possible. You'll also see on the right a plan depicting the open space at the southern end of the site, and the location of the retail, this sort of arcaded covered area that you described and showed earlier, and sort of the residential lobby in the orange here and towards the left. The diagram at the top begins to illustrate the visual connection that this enhances between Clybourne and Kingsbury, and really opens up the site on Kingsbury, and we think will make this a very good neighbor to any future developments that may occur along Kingsbury. A larger, we engaged and worked with the landscape architect to provide an initial study and concept imagery and design, which we're very excited about. The idea is passive use space, not programmed to any particular thing, but a space that allows people to come and enjoy and find their own spaces within the larger open space provided, and to allow multiple gatherings, of course, to occur at the same time. Also of interest to us is there's an existing rail line that follows sort of this arc in the site, which is, you know, the reason why the site is shaped the way it is. And so we tasked the landscape designer to incorporate that into the design as a remnant to the history of the place in the city that this is. And so still to be designed, but we think it can be provide really an interesting feature, unique element of the landscape that is, you know, you won't find it anywhere. It really grounds it to the place it is. And I think I turn it over to Fred.
Right. Thanks, Chris. I'm Fred Kroll with Sterling Bay. As part of this project, we will be complying with the Affordable Requirements Ordinance. And in this case, we intend to provide 20% of the overall unit count as affordable units. In this case, that would be 71 units of the total 355 units. Those units will be provided at a weighted average of 60% AMI. And they will be provided in the same proportion as the market rate units. Next slide. As I mentioned, we'll be doing 71 affordable units here. We anticipate that this project will create roughly 1,750 construction jobs, and we will be working toward the MBE-WB goal of 26 and 6. Overall, we see this project as replacing a vacant site with a new active use, including new commercial space. As Chris detailed, we will be devoting a third of the site to open space, including green space. And overall, we see this as increasing the safety and vibrancy of this portion of the North Branch corridor. We're looking forward for your feedback, and with that, we'll turn it over to questions.
Great. Thank you, Fred. Okay, everybody. We've got a lot of questions that I'm sure you have, because I can see them populating in the Q&A. People also submitted questions beforehand, and we will address all the topics that you have. I may be combining some of the pre-submitted questions as well as your Q&A questions, just because there is some overlap. And then at the end, we will have time to take live questions. So I just want to, before we get into some of the larger topics, and Chris, this is probably for you, just for clarification, on the design, the open space that's facing the alley, is that going to be open to the alley? Or is there going to be some sort of
the intention
wall,
is
fence?
It will be open to the alley. There'll be a way to circulate from the alley to Kingsbury. Okay,
so then people will be able to walk through that parking lot on the strip mall, across the alley, and onto that green space.
Yes.
For this design.
It is a private. Let me go back to that if it's helpful. just separating. Oh, I've got the Q&A. Okay, this is an existing parking lot. It is a private parking lot.
Yeah.
So we cannot control that, but there is an opportunity here, and should the potential ever arise to have some actual connection, physical connection to Clybourne, we feel like we want to be in a position to promote that, even if that's drive that direction, if it is at all possible. And so having a way to circulate towards the alley and back to Kingsbury, we think promotes that and goes in the right direction of what a great urban plan could be for the area.
Okay. So to some of the pre-submitted questions, just in general, a lot of people are wondering about the buffer zone that had been discussed for years. With regards to Lincoln Yards, the North Branch framework, where does this building fit into that? Because as we're looking at the designs right across the street, when you're measuring the 550-foot building, and can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then Fred, if you want to, if
Yeah.
I missed anything.
Yep.
So, like I mentioned, we are within the North Branch framework study area. We're outside of the overlay that was created. So on the other side of Kingsbury, the west side, there's an overlay that allows for a maximum 6.5 FAR or floor area ratio, which FAR is basically dictates how much you can build on a site, like putting it kind of simply, if it's a 10,000 square foot site with a 6.5 FAR, you can build 65,000 square feet, 6.5 times 10,000. We are, like I said, outside of that overlay, but still within the framework plan area. We're proposing here a 5 FAR. So it is less than what would be allowed to the west. And we discussed that quite a bit with DPD when it came to kind of stepping down from that higher density on the other side of Kingsbury to a 1.5 lower FAR on this side of Kingsbury, and then massing the building in such a way that it would allow, and I know we've shown it in some of the other context slides, but a transition from some of the approved buildings at a higher height to the west and the lower density neighborhood to the east. Anything you'd want to add to that, Fred?
Yeah, I would simply add, we had started with something that was a little shorter. However, it was still a 5 FAR. And the collective feedback over the course of really years now has been that more open space is preferred and what is needed, which in turn drove the building taller.
Okay. So Louis touched on this, and I think it was the second bullet point on his slide. Maybe adding this one building is what would be defined as incremental change to traffic patterns. But, from a neighborhood standpoint, part of some of these properties are in Sheffield Neighbors, some are in Ranch, some are in the 2nd Ward, some are in the 32nd Ward. So when we're looking at all of these buildings and designs, we're looking at it as a whole and not just one property. So, right now, the neighborhoods, and I use that plural, are most concerned with regional infrastructure. Because obviously, and we can talk about the Kennedy and Lakeshore Drive being under construction, but if they weren't under construction, there always will be something. And, people look at Cortland right now, and even before the pandemic, and see the backup. It's a real concern, and it's a concern for the neighbors that are here now, but also the people that will come in through any of the developments that you build and some of the other developers. Realistically, what can be done? Like, you've got a 275-foot story building here. Let's just, for this argument or for this conversation, let's just assume all the outlined buildings are built on the west side of Kingsbury and moving, west. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah. Well, I think is Brian, you may know, but it bears repeating. I mean, each project that goes through a plan development process needs to provide a traffic study. That traffic study is reviewed, commented upon, otherwise edited by CDOT. And they are the agency which, has the best ability, I think, to track the cumulative impact of these projects. So.
And I would add also, I saw this question come through in the chat. Those traffic studies aren't done in a vacuum. So yes, someone had asked if this traffic study was separate from the one that was done for another project nearby. And they're two separate traffic studies, but they take into account all area development. So CDOT reviews the list and lets Louis know if he missed one. We try to capture anything that's proposed, and that gets included in the model. And Louis mentioned this, but we have, based on conversations we've had with you, as well as with the alderman, even though we're just one of many developers in the area, and this is one of many projects, we have asked Louis to do a review and try to come up with some recommendations that we could, alongside the second board and SNA, take to CDOT for discussion. Kind of a wish list that we could take to them. So that work has started, and we're committed to, continuing that work with you guys. We certainly wouldn't want to start proposing things without talking to CDOT, because they're going to be a critical partner in this. But so we don't have any findings to share yet, but we are getting that pulled together, and we'll work with you in the alderman's office on how we, discuss that with the neighborhood as well.
So thank you, Katie. So I guess maybe walk some of us through how the city looks at this kind of stuff, because we're talking about, incremental change. They respond to this. Now, obviously, Lincoln Yards is across the street and moves west, and they can see through the plan commission like what you're thinking about, but you haven't proposed that yet. So when they actually do, are they only looking at the changes that could happen in traffic on the plans that are presented that day? Or are they assuming that other things will be coming in and they're making their value judgment based on that?
Louis, chime in if I'm wrong, because you're the engineer, but my understanding is it's the latter. They don't just look at each project in a silo. They look and include in their modeling and review other projects in the area. And I don't know, Louis, if you want to.
Yeah, that's correct, Katie. I mean, typically it's what's being considered or planned in the immediate vicinity of the site that may influence the traffic patterns in the study area.
So Louis, although plans for the buildings within the plan development haven't been presented yet, is CDOT, do they have those buildings in mind, or those future developments in mind when they're looking at the presentation of this building and how it would affect traffic?
What are you referencing, Lincoln Yards?
Yeah, just because, it's part of it, and granted, it has not been presented, and designs have, they haven't gone through that process yet, but is CDOT considering those? Because as the presentation, has, just the outlines of some of the buildings that, would probably be or may be included in a future Lincoln Yards design. When you're going in front of the city, they're seeing that too. Are they considering that when they're analyzing effects on traffic?
Yeah, not specifically for example, for this PD, because since there are no specific plans for the adjacent plan development, CDOT was not did not require, or was not one of their conditions to include that.
Okay, so then they wouldn't consider anything presented in the plan development until those plans are actually presented.
Yes,
as far as traffic is
different.
concerned for the
Yeah,
whole strip.
that is correct. Yes. Mhm.
Okay. I think that's one of the, going back to this, and we've, touched on a little bit, but I just want to I want to hit it home because I know most people on this call are most concerned with that. It's, we see it in the design. And so we want to start planning for that now, right? And we want to have that conversation. We want everybody to be on the same page in the same boat going in the same direction. Because, we're hoping that not just Sterling Bay, but any other developer that wants to develop in the neighborhood is, wanting to provide, transportation access to their new folks as well as the people that are already here. Katie, somebody else in the chat had asked earlier before we started talking about this, traffic studies, can they be made publicly available?
Yeah, we can get that over through you and the board office.
Okay. Thank you very much. A couple of questions came in ahead of time, and we may have talked about this, so forgive me if it's repetitive, but did we talk about, I believe we talked about parking spaces for cars, but were there bike parking spaces that were mentioned in the presentation?
I don't know if we mentioned in the presentation, but we'll be providing 360 bicycle spaces with the building.
Okay. And then Fred, since you talked about sort of the percentages of the units and whatnot, so the offerings for affordable out of the 71, between 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedrooms, that will be determined on what exactly?
They will mirror the number of market rate units.
Okay. Timelines for construction, expectations for traffic flow interruptions during construction.
Yeah. We would like to get started as soon as possible. Obviously, it's a challenging financing and interest rate environment. I think we are not alone in facing some of those headwinds here in Chicago, but nationwide. But we would like to get started on this in the first half of next year.
Okay. Do we know, it's been rumored and probably very, very openly discussed about the Cortlandt Street Bridge renovation. Does anybody here know when that will start?
I'd like to defer to maybe Brian Pellerin or somebody if they've heard anything more definitive.
Yeah, we would need to check on that. The timeline's been pushed a few times in the last couple of years, so I would need to check for the most recent information.
Okay. Based on that, well, Fred,
Yep.
Does your shovel in the ground date depend upon when they start working on that bridge? Like, would you start construction? Okay.
Yeah, it's not linked.
Okay. Does the proposal include fixing the road the stretch of Kingsbury? It's covered in potholes and old railway tracks. Sidewalks and/or bike lanes are a must-have. Not quite sure, because Kingsbury doesn't connect there, but since we're talking about Kingsbury,
yeah, what
are there
not to be overlooked is, I mean, we'll be really creating a sidewalk here to allow for pedestrian movement where it really doesn't exist in any kind of really very usable way today.
What, Fred, can you talk about Kingsbury going south of Cortlandt? Is that?
Yeah, I don't know what the timeline is on that.
Okay. Okay. Who owns that now? Is it still because it's,
well, I mean, immediately south of Portland, that is still obviously city right of way.
yeah.
The city has an easement through the portion a little bit farther south of that, which is owned by General Iron.
Yeah. Okay. So that's still under their easement. Okay. Again, a lot of traffic congestion questions that, we could probably discuss for at least, an hour, hour and a half. So for everybody, this is not the only time we're going to be talking about it, because, Sheffield Neighbors, Ranch, even Wrightwood Neighbors and some of the other associations, even on the other side, are very concerned with this.
So, just add to Katie.
Go ahead.
Brian, we at Sterling Bay are obviously committed to working with you and Sheffield Neighbors on working to advocate as effectively as possible to bring about, I think, some of the solutions that we're all looking for, frankly, to address not only issues today, but really some things that predate this project and real legacy issues that have been around for a while. So, we will work with you on this.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Can Sterling Bay or the alderperson provide details on the efforts of the Lincoln Yards Community Council and how the the community's concerns are to be provided to that council and the council's efforts reported to the community? What's going on with that Lincoln Yards Council?
Yeah, so the Community Advisory Council was run by the mayor's office, and there has not been a meeting in a while. I'm not sure what the plan is on that going forward.
Okay, and also just in the submitted questions, people are talking about the size being too large. There are also other comments about people saying build it right away. With all the apartments planned along Clybourne plus Lincoln Yards, where's the discussion right now for services for school, fire department, police? And I'm assuming a lot of the people that are on this call were probably also at the Marcy presentation back. I was at November, October, and I know Alderman Wagasback spoke to that. Fred and/or Katie, is what the alderman said at that point still the position where the city is not planning at this point any of those services?
When you say any of those services,
well, school, like Alderman Wagaspack, was very emphatic and said CPS is not building a school for, this side of the city, right? They're not building a new one. And then people were also asking about fire and police, and that wasn't really said. Yes, they absolutely will. It's kind of been, and that's come up too in other conversations about, the whole area. Are we still sort of at the same point where we were in the fall? That
I think what we understand is that CPS looks at demographics on a regular basis in determining how to allocate their resources. We did take a look as part of another project at capacity and learned that there is capacity for the schools that would be feeder schools of that project. So I think as it relates to the school question, that's what we've learned.
Okay. And then one final one from the pre-submitted. Can you briefly recap what made this project acceptable to the community and to the alderman, and did the adjacent alderman also support it? What I can say from a Sheffield neighborhood standpoint is we hosted a meeting as we discussed, we hosted a meeting last June where there were two different designs, and we said we wanted to see a final meeting or another meeting to talk about the one design that the developer had decided on. We didn't know that this was going in front of Plan Commission before this meeting, but we wanted to make sure, and as the alderman, that this was discussed now. So I guess Katie or Fred, whichever, can you walk through the process of Plan Commission and, if approved, what are the next steps?
Sure, I'm
Like,
happy
what
to-
is the plan? Most people probably don't know what the Chicago Plan Commission is.
Yeah, so because we're seeking a plan development, the rezoning application not only goes to the City Council Committee on Zoning, but it first goes to the Chicago Plan Commission, which is the recommending body that makes a recommendation on all plan developments to the City Council Committee on Zoning. Prior to going to Plan Commission, though, the application undergoes a robust review by not just the Department of Planning and Development, but CDOT, like we've talked about, Housing Department, Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, the Stormwater Bureau, and the Fire Prevention Bureau. That we originally started this process, like Fred mentioned, actually a number of years ago, back in early 2022. And we also made a stop at the Committee on Design, which not all projects do, which is another public meeting where design professionals convened by DPD reviewed and waited on the plan. We added that step kind of because it was so unique that we were hearing from some people, we want short buildings. From some, we were hearing tall with more open space. And so in addition to doing the community meeting last summer, I believe that meeting was in June, we also went to the Committee on Design. That was a public meeting that you can, I think, still view on the website. We did that in August. And then worked very closely with the Department of Planning and Development and their Northside planners that cover this area, and making sure that the plans fit within the guidelines, both for plan developments, but also that additional layer of guidelines that are in the North Branch Framework Plan. So I can't really speak to, what ultimately got everyone comfortable with it, other than we worked really hard with them at addressing their comments, and think that we've, arrived at a better plan as a result of it.
Okay. There are numerous questions about biking they're not referencing the street, but I'm assuming they're referring to Cortland and maybe even Kingsbury. So just in general, people are asking, protected bike lanes, are there going to be, what's the story on the plan for bike lanes for, I guess, Cortland and Kingsbury?
As it relates to Cortland, the long-term plan is to have a dedicated bike lane in each direction, and also for portions of Kingsbury.
So when you say dedicated, does that mean like a protected, not just paint?
Yeah,
but okay.
I don't know if those details have been worked out at this point, but
okay. And then I'm combining a number of questions here. Alderman, will the city consider reestablishing CTA Clybourne line?
Yeah, I would support that. Elston too, had a bus route years back. I would support the addition of both of them, and I think this interest in developments like this and some of the others that are at various stages of proposal, not just Lincoln Yards, but some of the others justify further study for that. So I will definitely advocate for that. CTA is probably not in a position right now to take on new routes just because of the fiscal cliff they're about to face. But that's going to force some serious reforms at that agency. There's talk about a dedicated bus route now. It's moved from Ashland, which was the subject of a study some years ago, to Western. And it hasn't taken the form of a formal proposal to CTA yet, but they've already reached back out to us as a legislative branch. They've told aldermen, hey, we think it's a good idea too. We can't do it now. We're basically in survival mode. And anybody on this call who's a CTA user knows that's true. So while I would certainly support trying to hit the start button on an advocacy campaign to bring bus service onto Clybourne, we'd have to be realistic and accept the unfortunate reality that the CTA is not in a position to take that on, as part of this particular development proposal.
So I guess sort of if we had an eye towards the future, total guesstimate wouldn't hold anybody to this. Are we looking at, is that something that could possibly be in effect 5 years from now, or is that more like 10 years?
I don't have a crystal ball. I think 10 years would be absurd to tell anyone that. I mean, I'm not comfortable saying that either. But right now, just with the relationship between the transportation committee on which I serve and CTA leadership is contentious, would be putting it mildly. So I probably couldn't pin them down to a time frame if I wanted to. All I can do is say, the case for additional bus service on angled streets like Clybourne, like Elston, the case makes itself. It's an objective data-based argument that no one can deny. So 100% I would support it easily. I would expect the community to be behind it just as strenuously. So let's do that. Let's do that without regard to what leadership of the CTA is going to tell us in response to that. It should be a consideration, and it should be a part of their plans.
Okay. A question about what the condos are going to cost. These are all rentals, correct, Fred?
Correct.
Yeah. Then there was a question about food deliveries defaulting to the front of Kingsbury. I don't really know if you could speak to that at this point, but somebody was curious about that. So the open public space, and this question comes from Margie. So not just that space that you've identified in the design on the south end, but I guess let's just talk about any of the open spaces that'll be a part of some of your buildings in the area. Is there any discussion with Park District on activating that park space, or is it your intent to put grass there, make it welcoming, and people can use it however they want? Is the Park District involved in any conversations with you guys right now?
No, not currently. We have had conversations in the past, and it's been a capacity issue, I think, for the Park District. And as to the space that we're proposing here, it is not intended to be program space. It would be, passive open space.
Okay. I don't know if you would know this offhand, but you may. Bridget's referencing an article by a John Burns, who's a real estate expert in LA, talking about large multi-unit property demand around the country declining. Do you know the vacancy rate for large multi-unit buildings in Chicago? And what would be the plan to draw residents to your buildings? And is there any concern about not filling enough units?
What I can speak to is a couple of other residential buildings that we have underway in Chicago, where we're seeing very robust demand, and which are leasing up rapidly. So I think what we're seeing here in Chicago is that there has not been the same amount of overbuilding that you saw in some of the Sunbelt cities and states, which has created a glut in certain circumstances. That is not what our experience has been here in Chicago recently. And I think there was just an article today which mentions the fact that very little is anticipated to come online, in the next, call it 12 months. So there will be kind of a natural supply shrinkage.
Okay. Is this project funded?
We are looking for financing.
Okay. And then are the KOLA traffic studies the only ones done for this? A couple people referenced independent traffic studies.
Yeah, the way that it works going through the approvals process is the developer is responsible for preparing a traffic study and submitting it to CDOT, but they have an engineering team that does a peer review and provides comment and kind of pokes at it prior to approving it.
Okay. Is Kingsbury going to be, and this goes back to the traffic, but I think this is something that a lot of people have asked, because I certainly did. Is Kingsbury going to be widened? Because of congestion in the neighborhood, many people cut through to Cortland on Kingsbury. This seems to be a straggling access point. So do people think, do you think Kingsbury will be widened? And not just for this project, but again, for everything that might come on board?
I don't know, Louis, if you have any insight into the Kingsbury existing right-of-way width and any plans.
I'm not aware of that, Katie, but we can certainly look into it as we look at this area-wide needs.
It's currently a 66-foot right-of-way, which is standard, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because no matter what comes in, obviously, it's going to be more than there's now, right? And even when Finkel was there.
Yeah.
So, and especially when we talk about like left-hand turn lanes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So.
I think to Fred's point, I mean, so it's a standard right-of-way. It's not narrower than, any other street in the city, but it probably feels that way given the current conditions in it. Like Fred said, there's really no pedestrian accommodations in it currently, and that will change. We'll be building sidewalks to CDOT standards. So I think it will be improved, and perhaps even just with those kind of reconfiguration of what is existing there. I know when I drive through there, it's hard to see like what's what because it's such, it's in such a poor condition. Maybe just kind of clearly delineating what is and isn't right of way would be helpful, given that what is currently public right of way is no different than other city streets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me just interject there. I think it should be considered. Kingsbury is potentially an opportunity for increasing capacity. It may be possible to widen it. It wouldn't necessarily make sense to do that unless we can remove the current vacation on the former General Iron property. And I'll just remind some of the people on this call who know the backstory. I lost many battles with the Labcon family under the two mayoral administrations ago, and that was one of them. That vacation expired, and I tried to not have it be renewed because I felt that they'd had it for 20 years. And we all knew that General Iron's demise was imminent, and it didn't make sense to renew it. Unfortunately, that mayoral administration at the time disagreed, and the vacation was renewed and granted to Alloy Properties Inc. So they have it once again, but it doesn't make sense, and the justification for allowing it is an ongoing active use, which is no longer there. So there may be another opportunity to strip away that vacation and return the Kingsbury right-of-way to public use. We should look at that in conjunction with potentially widening the street. And that could be done as part of this process that Louis had mentioned, where we're going through and basically conducting a community-wide inventory of opportunities to really address congestion and to request some specific congestion mitigation elements as part of the current development plans, not just for this proposal, but for some of the other ones that I'm dealing with right now. So I don't want to rule that out. It may be possible, and I think we should consider it a little more seriously than it has been up until now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think opening that up is critical, no matter what happens after that. So the park space, Fred, would you be able to compare it to any open public space just to give people an idea? Like, is there a comparison park that people might know, or?
You know, offhand, I don't have a reference point. This is, you know, roughly call it about a half acre, right, Chris?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Retail, any idea, first floor and second floor, or for just first floor?
First floor commercial.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
could be F&B, could be soft goods. It's about 7,500 square feet.
Okay. If there were to be, and we may have talked about this in the presentation, but just for those folks, with regards to retail, say that there is a restaurant in there, how much access would they have to parking?
So we've tried to be very thoughtful on parking here, and we are allotting for parking for the ground floor user, you know, kind of within the overall parking count. So, you know, we believe that we've struck the right balance in terms of being able to support the residential units as well as potential commercial users.
Okay. Let's go back to public trans. Katie, the measurement of distance between this property and what the city considers public transportation hub. It's on one of the slides, but I think that sort of cuts across the blocks, which you know, really isn't, that doesn't really tell us how far someone actually has to walk. Because you can't cross over that stuff. Do we know what it is in real life, you know, capability of somebody walking from that?
I don't think we have that measurement. What's shown on the slide is how the zoning code does it, which is property line to the CTA and within 2,640 feet. So, you know, we're well within that to Clybourne, and then, you know, within that for Armitage. I'm not sure, Chris, if we ever did like as the pedestrian walks kind of measurement.
No,
Yeah,
no.
I looked at it. I think it's like a 10 to 15 minute walking to the Armitage stop, and about 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes to Clybourne.
Thanks, Louis.
Less than 10 minutes to Clybourne, Louis, for what? Like, there's no public
The
transit in
metro,
Clybourne.
the
Oh,
Clybourne
from Metro.
stop.
Oh, sorry, the Metro stop.
Yeah, Clybourne
Okay.
Metro stop. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page here and what we're talking about. The loading dock for the rental units, where's that located?
Go to that. So this is what we spoke about earlier. Is the loading dock here is located sort of mid-building off of the alley, and it is an 18-foot alley, but we're pushing back the building from the alley to allow greater accessibility for the back here for the loading. So we're showing 2 loading spaces, wider and bigger than it needs to be, again, to accommodate more flexibility going in and out.
Okay. Fred, when you do break ground, what do you estimate construction time would be on this?
Brian Bazanis, I think you're on the line. Do you?
Fred, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. It's about a 24-month schedule for construction duration.
Okay. Would the building be open at certain parts of the building be open before you actually finish the entire building?
With large multi-unit buildings, they do get phased in from bottom upward. You know,
Mhm.
So we might split the building in two phases, a bottom half and a top half, with the top half being turned over at the 24-month period and the bottom half somewhere around 20, 21 months, something like that.
Okay. Fred, going back to the park, this is a question for this particular building, but I think it can be applied to probably every building Sterling Bay produces. The half-acre park, is that ever going to be closed off? Like, are you guys going to allow people to reserve it in full for private events?
You know, that's possible from time to time. But, you know, the intent is for it to, you know, be open and accessible just as a Chicago Park District open space would be.
Okay, Fred, something's going on with your mic. You sound
I think, you know, from time to time, it could be reserved, but, you know, overall, the space would open similar to a Chicago Park District, you know, park.
Okay. Do you have any idea of expected rental prices?
You know, that'll get finalized as we get closer to, you know, breaking ground and actually delivering the units. But, you know, somewhere in the, you know, upper $4 a square foot, I think is, you know, likely where this will be.
Okay. Can you speak to, do you know how much these new neighbors will increase the city's tax base? That's a question that was submitted twice.
Yeah. So over the next, call it, you know, maybe 12 years, we'd be looking at, you know, somewhere around, in total, like $17 million in real estate taxes.
Okay. And 17 million, and what's it doing now?
It's doing about 71,000.
Okay.
So obviously a significant
Per year. Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's a big difference.
So with regards to rental units or the leases, will they be able to lease out multiple parking spaces per unit? Or is that something you guys, okay.
Yeah.
Another traffic study question. I think we've covered that and everyone knows where we stand on that. This is not the end of the traffic conversation. We're looking at it regionally. Why didn't you include CDOT on this webinar so we can ask them questions directly? That's probably for anybody that has communication with CDOT.
Yeah,
which we as a neighborhood association don't.
The next community meeting we have will be featuring CDOT as well as the other traffic consultants that we're going to be using to engage in this community review process that Louie mentioned. So the CDOT representatives will be there. It would be nice if they were here tonight, but honestly, I don't think they would contribute anything of substance to this discussion tonight, even if they were here.
Okay. Brian Pellrine, I know you've been marking off some of these questions. Oh, the type of glass that you'll be using, Fred, is it bird safe?
You know, Chris, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Short answer is yes, and I would also say, if I can, I'll get back to the. So as architects and designers, especially in the city of Chicago, we're very aware and conscious, and like most Chicago citizens felt a bit of pain in our hearts when these big bird strikes happen like they have recently. And so it's always forefront in our mind. And for that reason, some of the textural quality of the building that was described before plays into a part of that, of how that's solved. Yes, there'll be fritted glass, bird-safe glass in zones of the building where it's needed. And thankfully, Chicago has adopted some pretty rigorous bird ordinances, and those are continuing to be to evolve and be upgraded. And we will, of course, be adhering to all of those, at a minimum. And so it is important a part of design and architecture and tall buildings in the city, and it's something we're very aware and working to be a friendly neighbor to the birds.
Okay. Again, going back to construction, and this deals with both this property and the property just south of it. So just for everybody on the call, several years ago, Sterling Bay presented its first property right at the corner of Cortland and Kingsbury for a retail outlet that was going to be mostly drive-through traffic. We had public meetings on it. We worked with Sterling Bay, and they actually changed the design to utilize Magnolia to the north to alleviate some of the traffic. So with these two properties in mind, Fred and Brian, could these both be potentially properties under construction at the same time, or would one have to be completed before the other starts?
Brian, you feel free.
Are we speaking of our site and the one immediately south of ours, or the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your site, and then your site just off on Kingsbury and Cortland.
Okay, gotcha. And the question is, if they were to be built at the same time, could that be done?
Well, do you foresee that both parcels would be under construction at the same time?
That's a really hard one to answer.
Yeah.
I
don't think we have as much visibility on the timeline with that, when that user would like to get going. So
okay.
I'm not, that doesn't seem to be overly likely.
Okay. And we had again, for the users on the call, through those discussions, it was publicly shared that, when that parcel is under construction, that Sterling Bay would not be taking up traffic lanes on Cortland while that is being built. Okay. You know what? I think it's probably time to take some live questions. It's about 6:45. I see a couple of hands up, and Brian Pellrine, if you could unmute Jessica.
Jessica, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you for taking my message and question. So I very much appreciate, Brian Hopkins, that you're going to meet with Clybourne Lofts. I'm part of Clybourne Lofts and on the board, and I'm representing them here today. In just a few minutes, or sorry, I just saw the second timer. In just the past few days, I've actually gone around to our residents and put up a petition and have received over 60% of our units in agreement that we are all opposed to the size of this building. We all want more buildings. We want more residential buildings. We want construction and development in this neighborhood. But we do find that this building is just out of scale with what currently is here. It will dwarf all other buildings around us and create a canyon effect that's not present in Ranch or the Clybourne corridor. Honestly, it's not even clear that funding or the need is here for this size of a development. Now, I definitely appreciate and love that there's affordable units. We want more people to live here and share in our neighborhood. I honestly came in a little skeptical on the building style, but the mix of brick and glass is very nice. And I really appreciate that there are some landscaping and options for the community. But as we've noted and heard on this call, the infrastructure is not able to support this size of a development and this scale. Transit options, we don't have any clue when those are going to be improved. Public transit is also already stressed. So there is limited public space in this. It seems to have very little benefit to the current community, and honestly, just really the developer. There's still a huge risk to pedestrians and cyclists on Clybourne from what I'm seeing with this. We don't fix the traffic issues. We don't fix the issues with just congestion. Also, there's no precedence for a building of this scale. The style somewhat fits into the neighborhood, but the height is completely disconnected with what we currently have. Again, I'm not saying that we should not build. I'm just saying, let's reduce it. Let's do something more in context with the neighborhood. Let's see how this works. There's no reason to jump to 25, 27, 30 stories when we haven't even confirmed that a 8 or 10-story building, residential building, is needed in this neighborhood. So thank you for the time. I appreciate a chance to talk. I really look forward to meeting with you, Alderman Hopkins, and others in the neighborhood as we continue to work with Ranch Triangle. Again, I very much appreciate the look of this building, what you're trying to do, the improvements to the neighborhood. I just think scale is a little bit out of what we were expecting.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica.
Jessica.
I did review your letter, and my office will be in touch with you tomorrow to schedule a breakout meeting.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay.
And Jessica, thanks for your comments and thoughts tonight. Brian Pellerine, Bridget Doherty.
Bridget's unmuted.
Hi, Bridget.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I know that there are a couple things that you covered in the presentation that I think are still confusing or unresolved I wanted to ask about. And I would also like to second, it is pretty. I like the use of the different materials. I can also second, I think the scale is too large for the area. And Alderman Hopkins, maybe this is more cost to you, my question. On an overall planning basis, this isn't the only project being proposed in the area. So you've got plenty coming across your desk, including the overarching big Sterling Bays project. And the whole infrastructure question, that is something I also was asking about when we were at Benny's. I still don't understand how we're going to get ambulances and everything across existing roads that are already jammed up, and keep people safe that way. Where are the police going to come from? Where's all that funding going to come from? And from the other standpoint was the real estate tax base. Maybe I need a complete math lesson on this, but I know that renters do not pay real estate tax. So is the real estate tax based on the number of units, no matter if they're vacant or not? Because that was Brian's point with the whatever it was, 71 million versus 71,000 or something similar. I'm trying to understand the leap on that, because I understand very much that our city needs more of a tax base. Of course, I would support more money, but it doesn't seem to me that it's guaranteed money yet. So if you could kind of explain about those two things, I'd very much appreciate it.
Alderman Hopkins.
I'll jump in on the. I'll let Fred handle the tax issue, but I'll jump in on the timing of the infrastructure build out, particularly in regards to Lincoln Yards. Just want to remind everyone that they're required to complete the transportation and other infrastructure build out on a specific time schedule before they go vertical with other projects. So that's all been laid out. They can't build the buildings first and then come back and build the roads later. That's not allowed. So to the extent that now there's other proposals besides this one, there's several others out there for consideration. Any decision made on this one in particular, because this is the one that started much earlier than some of the others that I'm dealing with right now that you mentioned, Bridget, It deserves a fair hearing and it deserves a decision on its own volition. And that's what we're going to do here. That does not prejudice any future decision. It doesn't obligate support or opposition, for that matter, for any of those other projects that are out there. In fact, I've communicated in recent weeks with some of the other developers that we're not able to move forward on a lot of these other projects that are now being proposed to me until we have a specific transportation plan that has things that the community can support. And we're not there yet. So I'd like to move expeditiously on that. It's not my intention to delay developers to have their day in court, so to speak. And with the timing being as it is, with economic factors at play, I understand that deals could potentially not come to fruition simply because we as a city can't move quickly enough to make some of these decisions. That's unfortunate, but I'm not going to take responsibility for that. I've been having this conversation with CDOT for years now, and it's now finally time. There are projects that could benefit this city that are hanging in the balance. And unless and until we get the kind of response to address the concerns in the letter that I just got from 1872 and others, we just can't do this. We can't keep pretending that solutions exist somewhere in the distant future. We need them today. We need them now. And it's my intention to use this moment where so many proposals are being presented as leverage to try and get the public agencies that are responsible for that infrastructure build out to get off the ball and start moving. So, let's hope we'll see some movement in the near future. The neighborhood organizations, Sheffield Neighbors Ranch and others are going to be a part of that conversation going forward. So we still have a lot of work left to do.
Yeah, you can address the tax question. So although renters don't receive individual tax bills, residential buildings, multifamily rental buildings such as this one absolutely pay taxes at the same rate as condos. They're just taxed, the bill is sent to the building owner or the landlord, and they're paid exactly like condos. It's all in one tax bill as opposed to separate ones like you see in condo buildings.
And Bridget, just to piggyback what the alderman was saying, and the folks from Sterling Bay and their attorneys can attest, they're probably sick of me talking about infrastructure at every single meeting we have with them. It is my absolute and SNA's absolute focus to make sure that all of us and the folks that are coming and the folks that come through shopping and working and playing in our community have the ability to do that. So that is always our first and last question, and a lot in between. So, but thank you for your comments. Hunter Gillespie, or Gillespie. I'm sorry if I got that last name wrong.
No, you're good. You got it.
Thank you.
So I think a lot of my questions have mostly been answered either in the chat or by other people who we just kind of finished answering one of them. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a couple of my thoughts about the project. I'm a homeowner in the 2nd Ward. I live in the Sandburg Village, which isn't super close to here, but it's close enough. I am strongly in support of this project. I think I don't think it's out of character with the surrounding neighborhoods. Although it may be one of the taller buildings in the immediate vicinity, I think we are quite close to downtown Chicago, which is the 3rd largest city, with the largest and one of the densest downtowns in the country. So I do not think that this is out of character by any means. I think that we need to think about the broader impact, not just a project by project basis. I'm an urban planner by trade, and I have a background in affordable housing development, and we have an affordable housing crisis in this country, and it's most severe in places like Chicago. So the ability to increase housing production, especially affordable units like this project provides, is extremely important, in addition to the property tax revenue that we just talked about, and all of the essential infrastructure and community services that provides. So just wanted to express my support for the project. I had asked a couple of questions about the property taxes. You provided that number. Yeah, just thanks for the very informative presentation. I hope that the alderman moves forward and approves this project.
Thank you for your comments, Hunter. Butler
Brian, I
Adams.
see, Butler's had his hand up for a while, and I have a hard stop at 7 o'clock. I've got an awards ceremony at the Chicago History Museum. It starts at 7, so let's let Butler have the last bite at the apple here.
Sure.
Hello?
Yes, Butler, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to say, yes, I am in favor of this project. I've had a chance to see it basically change design over the past year and a half. And I'm kind of surprised to all of a sudden hear about all these people against this project when it was in fact approved by the Plan Commission 3 weeks ago. Now, I know that it was approved by the Plan Commission because I was there. And I, in fact, spoke in favor of this building. All those who have said they're against the project, none of them were there. And I also know that they said that there was a letter of support from the alderman at the Plan Commission. So I don't see what the back and forth is about the height and the density, especially when Lincoln Yards has been approved. This may be outside of Lincoln Yards, but you're going to have buildings in the area that are going to be over 500 feet tall. And this is half of that height. I'm kind of tired of the NIMBY pushback that we always have when it comes to these great projects and decent projects. And I just hope that the alderman can say, yes, this project should happen. I hope that it goes through zoning committee and the full city council. And alderman, I really hope that you approve this project and a lot of the other ones that are basically on your desk, kind of moving forward through the process. It takes so long to get things done in this city, and it's very frustrating. So I spoke in favor of this project at Plan Commission. No one spoke against it. And I certainly hope that the alderman is in favor of this project. And it's very frustrating to hear this back and forth all the time with those not in my backyard. So I hope it gets approved fully. Thank you.
Butler, thank you
Butler,
so much.
let me just remind you, Butler, I have a vote on the zoning committee. I don't have a vote on the Plan Commission. So, and I wasn't at that meeting. I know you were. But there's some valid concerns that have been raised tonight, and they do need to be addressed. That's what this meeting is for. So I'm going to continue to have those discussions.
Like I said, they said there's a lot of support from you, so.
Okay, but thanks for your feedback as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, Butler, thanks for your comments. And that's great that you were at the meeting. Not everybody knew that meeting was going on, and so that's why we're having this meeting tonight. So, but we're up against 7 o'clock. For our part, for Sheffield Neighbors, I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight, including the presenters. Any questions you have that have not been answered, please email to us at info@sheffieldneighborhood.org. Our board has not made a decision on this. We will take into account this meeting, and we will be expressing our opinion very shortly, and we'll share that with the aldermen as well as the developers. But I just want to thank everybody for their time tonight. Alderman?
All right, thanks everyone. I appreciate it, and we'll be reaching out to the association at 1872 and anyone else who needs additional follow-up. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.